let me ask you, because the American Prospect, which again, people should check you guys out. You do great work. You wrote out a whole list of executive actions he could take, which put aside whatever, he's a institutionalist and an old timer with the Senate. Okay, well, seems like he's coming around on the filibuster, even though he's not going on aggressive offense against Manchin or Sinema. But can you kind of talk about the executive actions he could take, and why do you think he's not taking it? Because in my view, my very simple view of politics, we live in the United Corporations of America, and they're doing what the donors will allow them to do. Because I don't believe the donors in either party want to open the spigot of consistent stimulus, pandemic or not, because that sets expectations and that shows, oh, wait, we can afford these things. So can you kind of talk about what are the top executive actions that he could do if he wants? How would they improve people's situation? And why do you think he's not?
There's a bevy of executive actions. Biden's taken some, but mostly those are the kind that were either reversing Trump things or doing things that don't actually affect that United Corporations of America kind of side of it. So some of the biggest actions that we've heard about for a while are cancellation of student debt. We have this huge student debt crisis, a lot of defaults. They've been paused for 2 years. No one's had a problem with that. In fact, it's been really good for graduates who haven't had that burden of $400 a month on average. But it's supposed to start up again in May. And the Secretary of Education has the authority to change the terms of those loan contracts, including by canceling them entirely. And this is something that activists have asked for the last year and a half, and Biden has been resistant to it. Another example is action on drug prices. So prescription drug prices, there are ways, those patents are granted by the United States of America, right? We say you have exclusive ability to market this particular life-saving drug for 20 years, even though we, the people, the taxpayers, paid for the research and development to get you to be able to have that drug. You go ahead, private drug company, you profit from it for 20 years. We could change the terms of those patents. There are ways to use what are called march-in rights. If the drug was developed with federal support, you can go in and say it's not being given on reasonable terms to the consumer, in other words, affordably, and you can take those patents and give them to someone who will sell them affordably. There are options on making, removing descheduling is what they call it, descheduling marijuana from the list of controlled substances so that it is not any longer essentially an illegal drug. And that would open up not only the ability for people who are, suffering from a very disproportionately Black and Latino set of drug crimes. It would also allow the business that has gone up around legalized marijuana in various states to use federally chartered banks, for example, and to allow their businesses to not be done entirely in cash, and to regularize that business so that it's not more attractive to go to the pusher on the street. So those are just a few examples. And I think there are many, many more. You can go to, we actually have an executive action tracker at our website, prospect.org/EAT or EAT. There's a host of climate actions. There's a host of financial actions. There's things like starting a public credit registry, so we're not reliant on the credit bureaus. There are a whole host of things, and they're all listed there.
Mm-hmm. And my last question for this, because your piece talks about austerity. I mean, at the end of the day, if you go back to Obama, experts have said, I believe, his stimulus in 2009-10 was insufficient. Mm-hmm. He ran on, parting the seas. He ran very progressive, ended up, providing a Republican healthcare plan. He got through in 2012, weak candidate, he got some breaks. But Trump, part of why Trump won was because a lot of people, 10% of Obama voters switched over to Trump. Hillary Clinton, I mean, there was depressed turnout among Black voters in some of the key areas. So I just see kind of a similar playbook here where, yes, it's different. Democrats only have this 50-50, majority, but at the same time, kind of negotiating against themselves on so many things. Obama, in Obama's case, chose to be civil with the Republicans, try and negotiate with them. Biden's doing the same thing, only with the Republicans in the Democratic Party. Manchin and Sinema. It's not all Manchin and Sinema, we should say, because I think there's several others
they're hiding behind them.
Hiding behind them, and Manchin and Sinema are taking the arrows. But I just want to ask you about the parallels, because it seems to me, I mean, hey, I'm no fan of the Democratic Party, but I also, a Republican tidal wave is not optimal either. But it seems to me Biden is basically, after the original nauseating onslaught of Biden is FDR articles, he is basically, it just looks like he's folding the tent and giving away his power to Manchin, Sinema. And when I say going on offense, can you imagine Lyndon B. Johnson? I mean, he was terrible on other things, Vietnam. He would not allow Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema to cripple his presidency. It just seems like there is no will to aggressively go on offense. I'm talking publicly shaming, tarring and feathering, because I think that's your best bet, is to publicly galvanize the working class and Americans against these two senators and see if they'll continue to hold it up.
Well, it is kind of amazing that Biden did a speech in Georgia this week on voting rights, and it took all of 24 hours for Sinema to go on the floor of the Senate and say nothing of what Joe Biden said moved me at all. I don't think there's a lot of fear of Joe Biden the way that there might have been of Lyndon Johnson. But here's what amazing
for a reason, because he doesn't actually do anything.
I mean, the proof is in the pudding, absolutely. So, but here is the amazing parallel. So. The Obama stimulus was, as you said, too inadequate. By the middle of 2010, if you look at fiscal policy's contribution to economic growth, it turned negative. It started taking away from growth at the end in the second quarter of 2010. So within a year and a half of Obama's presidency. And we saw the effects of that, a very slow recovery and a wipeout in 2010 at the polls. When Biden got in, he was determined not to do that. And the Democrats were talking about it actually very directly, almost for the first time. What Obama did was wrong. We are going to actually give the economy what it needs at this time of economic stress. And so they passed the American Rescue Plan. Well, almost nothing has happened since then, except for the infrastructure bill, which is very long term. And here we are. There's data that, the same data that we saw in terms of fiscal policy and growth in 2010. It shows now that in the last quarter of 2021, fiscal policy was about even. And by this quarter, one quarter before when Obama's turned negative, it's going to turn negative this quarter. So for all the talk that we learned the lessons of a too small stimulus, and we learned the lessons of low public investment, which is what Build Back Better was going to be, a sustained public investment, whether through the child tax credit or for assistance for things like childcare or elder care or paid family leave, et cetera. We learned the lessons. We're not going to do that anymore. We're actually going to bolster public investment, and we're going to continue to support working families where necessary. Well, guess what? We're not. We went right back into that position. And I think legislative paralysis is what it mostly has to do with. And yes, you're right to say that Obama was dealing with 60 votes in the Senate, whereas Manchin and Sinema are on the cusp of a 50 vote Democratic Senate. So much harder to get that agenda forward. However, the numbers are the numbers, and there was this sort of collective promise that we're not going to make the same mistake again, and we're making the same mistake again.